So g'day everyone, welcome back to another bush creep fly tying tutorial. So in this video we're tying up this fly, which is what I call my PiTCH, which creatively stands for Partridge, Tippet and clipped hackle. And there's a little bit of ostrich in, natural ostrich in here, and I'll explain that when I get to it. But that's what it's called. They're called the PiTCH Nymph. And as I said, it's pretty creatively described. So it's pretty effective, and it seems to be working pretty well. So I thought I'd do a video, and there's a number of people ask me how to tie this. So we'll do a video and show you how to do it. It's pretty straightforward, fly the tie. You can punch them out pretty quick once you get yourself sorted out. So the hook I'm using for this is a Dohuku 302 in size 14. And to that hook, I've added a tungsten offset or jig off, however you want to describe it, bead. So this is clearly one of these ones that's offset. You could probably do the same thing with a or just use a normal countersunk bead or something similar, but I like the offset beads with this. And basically you fix the bead to the hook, you know, sort of however you prefer to fix that, whether that's glue or resin or bit of thread. You'll work it out from there. But anyway, offset bead, so a tiny little one. So the thread I use for this is I'm using nano silk in 18.0. You want a nice strong thin thread. Doesn't have to be nano silk, but something that's nice and reasonably strong and thin is usually a good thread to use. So I'm just going to catch that thread on, and I'll just trim away the waste piece here, and then run this thread all the way down the shank, basically just to the point where it's just about to go over the bend of the shank. So the tail for this one is Tippet. So for this particular fly, I'm using silver pheasant dyed golden yellow, I should say. I do a couple of different variations of this fly using just normal orange golden pheasant Tippet. So you know, you can mix it up a bit, but this one uses a coloured tail. And it sort of acts as both as a tail representing the tail, but also as a bit of a tag as well, I guess, for this particular fly. So you don't need many fibres, probably maybe 4 or 5, something like that, half a dozen, somewhere around about that. Try and keep the bars lined up when you take it away. And so I'm just going to snip this Tippet away from the feather, and that's what I'm using here. Now, depending on which part of the Tippet you're using, you either try and tie in at this second bar, the lower bar on the Tippet, or having the tail at about the length that you like. So I'm going to use this bar as a guide, and I'm going to tie it in there. So 2 turns to capture it in, and then I'm just going to duck one underneath to lock it all down. So that tail now is locked into the position I want it. I'm just going to come away, and I'm going to trim away that waste piece up the front. So the next material for this fly is just genetic saddle cock hackle. This one's dyed brown olive, and I'm just going to pull away the front end here and catch that in at the side, and then from there, touching turns more or less. I'm just going to lock all that down and bring it back down to the end. So the hackle itself, all I'm going to do here is basically just wrap this hackle, nice tight turn at the back, and then touching turns, bring this hackle all the way up back to the bead, or just about the bead. So this is all it is. Touching turns, just bringing this hackle back up. Now I want to stop it just a little bit short of the bead. I want to give myself room to do the rest of the hackle. So maybe come up until you're about a turn, maybe 2 turns away from the back of the bead, and then catch in that hackle at that point. So a couple of turns to catch it in, and another 1 or 2 turns to lock it down. And I'm just going to come in, I'm going to trim away the surplus hackle, and then I'm just going to do a couple of turns of whip finish just to lock that down, because I'm going to rotate the hook, and that'll just help avoid having the thread bounce off. So at this point, we're getting to the clip tackle part, and this is where I guess you got to have a little bit of faith, but it's pretty straightforward. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to come in and on a taper, trip off the fibers of the hackle and get down to just that fuzz. So the idea here is that by clipping the hackle, I'm creating the impression of some body mass without necessarily introducing too much materials. So whereas you could do, you could probably, achieve it, tie this using some dubbing. That dubbing in itself is going to create some mass, and I'm trying to sort of avoid that a little bit. So you clipping the hackle and using the hackle, in a buzz sort of effect, allows me to create the impression of body mass without necessarily introducing a lot of materials. And that's all you do, just a little bit of a taper down, get a body form that you sort of like, you can fill around with it, but you don't have to be too precious. But and that's basically it, clipping the hackle. So from here, I'm then going to tie in my next material, and the next material is just a hurl of ostrich, natural ostrich. I'm going to tie that in at the butt. Now, the reason I'm using the ostrich is what I've started to do with my hackles on this particular fly is essentially twist the hackles just to create a bit more of an open hackling effect. But the problem is Partridge has a little bit, it's pretty delicate at the tip, and you have a risk of ripping it off. So what I do here is I use a piece of ostrich hurl to just help reinforce the hackle or the Partridge stem, and twist against it. And I'll show you how we do that. So Partridge hackle, get a nice shaped one, work out how much material you want. You don't need a whole lot, and you don't want to make it too leggy, but you do want, a reasonable amount of material so you get some nice hackling effect. And I'm just using hackle pliers here to catch it at the tip, and then draw those fibers back away from that point, and come in, and I'm going to trim away this tip, and then go in and catch in that little tip that I just cut, a couple of turns to lock it, one to lock it down. So the next step is to essentially hackle the fly. I find it easier to use one of these little test clip. You can use a small pair of hackle pliers, but because I want to twist it, I find this is a lot more convenient, a little more easier. So I'm going to come in with my clip here, and I'm just going to catch the very butt of the hackle stem and the ostrich at the same time, and then come in and just trim away a little bit this way so it doesn't twist up into itself. And from here, just bringing everything vertical, I'm just going to gently twist this. Now, you do a few twists first. Don't try and twist it all up, otherwise you'll twist the tip of the Partridge off. Do a few twists to start with, and then do a wrap. And then as you come back over, just continue that twist, rotating your hackle around behind that bead until you've used all your hackle. So once you get everything back to the top, it's over with the thread. So 1, 2 turns to capture it, and then 1 directly between it and the bead just to help lock that down. And then from here, I'm gonna just take away this clip and come in and do a 2 or 3 turn whip finish, bearing in mind I've got thin thread here, directly behind the bead, just to lock all that down. All that nice and tight. I'm then going to come away, and I'm going to take my Partridge stem and trim that off. Real nice down close behind the bead. And then I'm going to come back in with the clip or hackle pliers, whichever is convenient for you. Capture this last piece of ostrich, and then I'm just going to do another 2 or 3 turns directly behind the bead with that ostrich, and that'll just help sort of tidy up and hide up the stem, and then also call it the Partridge leg. Here we go. It'll also help hide up the thread. 2 or 3 turns, come over with the thread, couple of turns to catch that in, 1 turn in front to lock it down, take out the tension, then I can trim this away, and then straight in with my whip finisher to do another 2 or 3 turns whip finish, pull that nice and firm, and that is all you need to do there, because you've already locked down most of the fly already. I'm just going to trim away this thread, and then you can play around with the hackles. Now you'll notice because we've palmed or twisted the hackle, you actually get the hackle going sort of all over the place. Now this is really useful because it helps to avoid all the hackle falling back down straight on itself. It has a tendency to try and keep it nice and proud and really buggy, and it works really quite well. And that is the PiTCH. So the Partridge, Tippet, clipped hackle, a little bit of ostrich, but pretty effective fly I found. Relatively easy to tie, and so if you try it, let me know how you go. Otherwise, tight lines. See you next time.